What's up, guys? Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Worldwide podcast. Today we have a very special episode for all of you that are not in the United States, okay? Today we're gonna talk about everything you need to invest in the United States. There's a lot of information about investing as an American here in the United States, but not a lot if you're a foreign national wanting to take advantage of the American market. Josh, how you doing, man?
What's up, man? I'm well. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you. All right, so let's get started. So as you know, the podcast is mostly about people that want to invest in other parts of the world. Now, there's a lot of content about buyers in the US investing in the US, right? There's not a lot of content about people outside of the US wanting to invest in the United States. And, let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
well, tell me a little bit first about yourself, okay? Tell me how you got into the mortgage industry.
So I got into the mortgage industry about 5 years ago. I had a buddy of mine actually reach out to me and tell me, hey, I think you'd be a good fit. We're actually hiring. So just due to timing and kind of where I was at in life, it just made sense at the time. And come 5 years later, I've helped hundreds of people close on the home. I've helped hundreds of realtors make that happen. So it's just been a blessing. It's been a huge blessing for me.
That's amazing. Well, tell us about Cliffco. Tell us about your bank. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
So Cliffco is awesome. They've been around since 1989. We've been a local lender. We've been a leader in the lending space for quite some time. And we're very modern with how we approach the lending side of things. We have tons of programs that fit different molds. We have flexibility. We have investor loans, fix and flip loans. We have a ton of different programs. So Cliffco is, and we're expanding. Not forget that. We're in 30 states at the moment.
Okay.
And that footprint is growing. So, it's been quite a ride.
I love that. And just so you guys know, I'm one of the managing partners of Division Elite team here at Keller Williams. And Josh and the Cliffco team, they're amazing. And I genuinely mean that. I don't just consider him a business partner, but I also consider him a friend. So he does very, very good work. So anybody that needs to purchase a mortgage, whether you're in the US or outside, Josh is going to be your guy. All right. But okay, so let's talk about it. Now, obviously the episode today is about investors outside of the US wanting to invest here. So tell us a little bit about how that would work in your line of experience.
Yes. So there might be a misconception that foreign investors have to purchase property in cash in the US, but that's not the case. So actually for investment properties or second homes, because that's what they're allowed to purchase, you can't purchase a primary if you don't have any sort of citizenship or, papers here, but you can purchase an investment property or second home, and you can actually finance up to 70% of that property. So what does that look like for the average foreign investor that may be interested in breaking into New York City? Let's say that they want to buy a 2-family home. The property's $1 million. They're going to need at least $300,000 to put down plus your closing costs.
Okay.
Right? Which is another 4 or 5% of the loan amount. In addition to down payment and closing costs, they're also going to need 12 months of cash reserves in the bank.
Okay. And just for the audience, so you guys know, and outside of the country, it might be a little bit foreign to hear the word cash. But here in the United States, when we say cash, we actually don't mean a bag full of cash.
Right.
We mean all the money in a bank account that will be transferred to another bank account.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I did want to make that clear. But okay, so talk to me about the types of documents that a foreign investor, so we know they can't purchase a primary home, but they can invest a secondary home or a vacation home?
Vacation home, yep.
Investment property?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Investment
so
property.
tell us, what do they need?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you're looking to purchase a second home or a vacation property, so to say, you're going to need your personal income to be verified. Now, how do we verify that as a U.S. lender? We're going to need verification from your accountant. Okay, so if you have an accountant in your country that handles either you own a business or maybe you don't and you're an employee, the accountant is going to have to sign off and basically give us the income that you've earned for the past 2 years if you're purchasing a second home. Now, if you're purchasing an investment property, it's a little different. You use the rental income of the property to qualify, and you don't have to use your personal income, right? So if a foreign investor wants to buy an investment property and they may not have an accountant, that's okay because you're using the property's income to qualify in order to purchase.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about that. So how do those types of loans work?
Yeah, so it's a DSCR loan, a debt service coverage ratio loan.
That service coverage,
right? So if you have an investor that's out of the country and they want to start building a portfolio here, they're going to utilize a DSCR loan, and that's going to still have the 30% down requirement. You do not need U.S. credit to get one. Actually, they substitute U.S. credit for what they consider asset-based lending, right?
Okay.
So that's why the down payment's a little higher. That's why they want cash reserves. And that's why they're going to ask to see bank statements, right? Because the more cash that you have, the less riskier it is to the bank.
Can these bank statements do they have to necessarily be American bank accounts? Can they be foreign? Let's say, I don't know, like a Barclays or HSBC China. I don't know. How does that work?
That's a great question. So they will need a U.S. bank account to close. It can come from, the funds can come from different countries, but prior to closing, they will need a U.S. bank account to transfer the funds into. Okay. So sometimes, depending on where the country is and what currency they use, they may have to get it, translated or, what's the word when they
I get
off the currency?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I get what you're saying. So they would need to have. You're talking about in terms of the actual bank statements.
Yeah,
they need to be transcribed and translated into English.
Exactly.
Understood. Okay. So for everybody that's in the audience, basically you do need an American bank account, right? But the money originally doesn't have to come from an American bank account. It can come from a foreign bank account, transferred to an American bank account, and then you're ready to go.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, perfect. So now that we know that, so once you have all of that together, then what are the next steps?
Yeah, so pretty much you would have a realtor kind of search on your behalf, kind of see what's out there. We would give them the numbers up front, right? You want to understand how much money you need for the transaction so that they make sure that they have enough money in their bank account in, whatever currency that may be. So I would say prepping and making sure you're ready to take the next step would ultimately entail finding the right property based off the numbers we go over.
Okay.
Right? So we get you pre-approved. Obviously we send you a copy as the realtor, but we also send the client a copy so that they know exactly what the numbers entail.
Okay, beautiful. So now for the audience, right, we have a pre-approval with Josh. Okay. So then your next step would be to hire a realtor. Most of you may or may not know, but here in the United States, you need to, in order to be a realtor, you need to be licensed. So lots of other countries, you actually don't need to be licensed to be a realtor.
Really?
So yeah, it could be very, very tricky finding somebody outside of the United States, right? Here in the United States, you have to be licensed. So find somebody that's licensed and they'll be able to help you out. So it can't be your cousin that knows a little bit about real estate, bought a home before, like in other countries, because that happens. My uncle bought a home. Hey, you know what? Let me help you buy a home. I'll represent you. That's not how it works here. Okay. So you're protected. And there's a lot of laws that protect you as the consumer buying a property, being represented by a realtor.
Absolutely.
Okay? So that is the first step, is getting that pre-approval from Josh or any bank, okay, an American institution. And as you know, it's not just New York City, right? This is where we're based out of, but Josh actually and Clifco, they're licensed in many, many states. And then obviously, if there's a specific state that you're looking at, you can always go to Josh here, and then he can definitely help you out. First step is that pre-approval. The second step is obviously finding a realtor, right? Now, they'll probably ask you a series of questions in terms of how and what you need to do to buy the property, okay? Not including the bank, all right? And in terms of the steps, right? Once you have that pre-approval, you guys can start looking at properties.
Yep.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Now, for you, when a realtor comes to you and they want to put in an offer, okay? Let's assume the realtor takes out the client, foreign national,
Right.
And they're browsing properties, and then they find something that they like, okay? What's the steps when you get involved?
So first things first, I would set up a call between me, the realtor, and the client. right? Because I'd want us to be on the same page. I want us to understand what the numbers look like, what's going into the offer at that stage, making sure the client understands some intricacies that we may have here that they might not have in their country, right? Because I know it's a little bit different depending on where they're located. So, really, we want to make sure that the seller's comfortable. That's another thing, right? Because once you're investing in this country, if they know that somebody's out of the country, investing and getting a loan, from my experience, they're going to want to talk to the lender. They're going to want to vet the client. They're going to want to make sure that the financing is in order, right? As any normal seller would like to do. So next step would be for me is getting on the call, making sure we have all of our ducks in a row, reaching out to the listing agent of the property, right? Because again, depending on their customs and where they're at, what we like to do here as a lender, or I like to do it at least, we call up the listing agent to confirm that the financing is in order on your behalf. Okay. We want to make sure that they're comfortable, the seller's comfortable. They understand that we're going to get to the closing table. They understand that although it's a foreign national loan, the process doesn't change, right? We're still going to be able to close on time. We're still going to be able to communicate and build that transparency and let them know what's going on throughout the course of the process, because the financing is the financing, right? Whether it's a resident alien with a green card or whether it's a foreign national investor that doesn't have a social security, we want to provide that comfort and that visibility, so to say, for the client.
Okay. All right, perfect. So just for the audience too, right? Just so you know, once we have an agreement in terms of how much we should offer, your interest rates, your offer price, right? It's the realtor's responsibility to negotiate on your behalf.
Yep.
Now, if and when you get an accepted offer, the next step that we always recommend, especially if you're buying a property in the United States as a foreign national for the first time, is an inspection, okay? A licensed inspector. That is pivotal because there's things that the home may be brand new construction, and they may not know, not everything may appear as it seems, okay? So that's where you get a third-party inspector, which the realtor will help you find, or you can find by yourself online. There's many websites.
Yep.
Okay? And I'm going to specifically talk about New York State.
Yeah.
Every state has different sets of rules in terms of when the inspection is. So in New York State, once you have a verbal accepted offer, then you can do the inspection. Okay? In other states, you first get under contract, you put in your earnest money, then you do your inspection. And there's a due diligence period after the contracts are signed for the inspection. But for the sake of New York State, you get an accepted offer, is step one. Step two is that inspection. And then step three is when, and this is an attorney state, attorneys get involved. Okay? Now, you as the buyer, you have to have legal representation. And the realtor should be able to know a few real estate specific attorneys to help represent you in the transaction. Okay? Now, in the steps of the process, it's very similar whether you're a foreign national or not. The buyers will sign first, okay? The attorney will go over the contracts with you. You will put a certain amount of money down on contract. In some states, it's called earnest money. Here in New York, it's money down on contract. Usually, it's around 10% of the amount that you're purchasing, okay? So if you purchase $1 million property, you're putting down 30%. You're only putting down 10% down on contract, okay? That money basically is to ensure that you're serious. The next step would be for the sellers to sign. Now, at that point, neither the buyer or the seller can back out.
Right.
If you have an accepted offer on contract for $1 million and hypothetically somebody comes with $10 million cash, legally they cannot accept that money, okay? So once we're under contract, Josh, obviously we have to let you, the loan officer, know. What happens next?
Yeah, so we're going to order an appraisal, right? What's an appraisal? Basically, it's the bank sending out an appraiser to the property, and the appraiser is going to generate a report. They're basically going to check to see what's sold in the last 6 months, right, to a year. And they're basically going to give us a fair market value of the property. This is to benefit the borrower and protect the borrower, because at the end of the day, you don't want to overpay for a property, right? So the appraiser goes out, they make sure that that $1 million home is actually worth $1 million based off what's sold in the neighborhood, right? If it comes in shorter, it's a different conversation. At that point, the realtor, the attorney, the loan officer, we're kind of negotiating on your behalf to see what could be done. Or if it comes in higher, just means that the property's fair market value is more than what you're purchasing it for, right? So higher is always better. But Kev, I have a question, if I may, because some of them may not know. Prior to signing the contracts, right? Because you mentioned the inspection, and that's such an important part of the process. I think that's one of the most important parts of it. As a foreign national buyer, can they negotiate terms in the contract based off what's found in that inspection report? Like, do they have that power?
100%. Now, there's a lot of things that you have to look out for in these inspections. Ideally, depending on the age of the property, but let's assume it's a resale property here in New York City, which there's not too much new construction as opposed to other states,
Right.
like a Florida, like a Texas,
Right.
okay, where home builders have their warranties. Here in New York, you kind of have to negotiate certain things with the owner.
Mm-hmm.
So things to look out for. It's usually health and safety. So, for example, leaks, mold, termites, electrical, plumbing, the roof, the foundation. So these are things to look out for. Doesn't matter how many other offers there are, you can still negotiate these things because any offer, any buyer is going to point this out. Okay, so you do have the right. And I've had it multiple times where the electrical panel is not working or there's certain things like there's a roof leak. Any buyer's picking that out. Right. So you do have the right to go back and get some money or you can request repairs.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's a big distinction between the inspection and the appraisal. Inspection is for safety and hazard, what needs to be addressed as far as what's wrong in the property or what could potentially cause an issue. And appraisal is not necessarily going to call out safety issues, but they're going to give you what the property's worth.
Mm-hmm.
So big difference there.
That appraisal, sometimes I've seen it, 5-10 minutes. The appraiser goes inside, takes some pictures, and he leaves.
How long would you say an inspection takes? Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's where I was going to go to. An inspection can take anywhere between 35, 45. I've seen an hour long, right? An hour and a half. It depends, right? Sometimes the buyers, they want to know every single little thing. So the inspector's there to explain it, right? And again, it's important too to know which inspector you get because it's like anything. There's good realtors, there's bad realtors. Right. There's good loan officers, there's bad loan officers. Right. There's good inspectors, there's bad inspectors. So you want to hire somebody that's going to be willing to explain everything in the home. Because there's a lot, all right? And you'll get a full report after that inspection. Right. And again, bear in mind, this all happens after the verbal accepted offer, before contracts are signed.
Yep. And then appraisal happens right after contracts are signed. I get a copy of the contract as the bank. We order that appraisal. Usually within a week or so, we'll have the appraisal report back and we'll know exactly what the appraised value is.
But yes. Okay. Now, Josh, explain a little bit, because I know DSCR, especially let's say you're going to buy a 2-family home. Okay. Does the appraiser do any extra due diligence in terms of how much the rents are?
Oh, that's a great question. So multifamily homes they're common, right, in New York City, right? 2, 3, 4 units considered residential multifamily homes. If you're an investor and you want more rental income, these are a great option. Appraisers are going to check to see what multifamily homes in the area have been rented for. So it is a part of the appraisal that we're going to look at as well. So you're going to get the value of the property, but you'd also get the value of the market rents, how much the rents are going for in that area for 2, 3, 4 bedrooms or however many bedrooms the apartment may have, right? So that's a big distinction. As far as extra legwork goes, the appraisal is pretty much the same because I feel like they're more, and you could probably attest to this as a realtor, but they're common in New York City. So there's a lot of data for the appraiser to work with, whether it's single family or multifamily. That's not going to delay you at all. There's no extra lead time. It's not a harder finance. It's all kind of relative. So,
okay.
Yep.
Now, I know you said that there's another type of loan that the foreign national can get. Can it only be DSCR or can it be any other type of loan?
Yeah, so there's really 2 types. One is going to be the DSCR loan, which is specific for investment properties, right? If they want to rent out the property, they can close in an LLC if they close in a DSCR loan. The second option is going to be that vacation home, right? What we consider second home. The second home option does not use rental income of the property because you're not intending to use it for business purposes. You're intending to use it for leisure, right? Coming on vacation with the family, with the kids, right? That's leisure. That's not business purpose. So with that option for second homes, they're going to look at your personal income, right? Obviously, you're not filing U.S. tax returns, right? If you're not a resident or a citizen. So they're going to go to your country, right? Let's just say Canada, for instance, right? If you're running a business out of Canada, or if you're working a 9 to 5 out of Canada, they're going to want to see those tax returns, right? Now, obviously, tax returns in Canada are different than the U.S. So the way that the U.S. banks kind of navigate that is we actually will take verification from the accountant signing off on the past 2 years of their income.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yep. So the financing is different in terms of how you qualify, but the financing requirements remain the same. It's still going to be at least 30% down, right? So we'll finance up to 70% of the property, and you're still going to need at least 12 months of cash reserves. The lower the down payment, 40, 50, 60% down, the less cash reserves that you may have to show. But what's pretty standard out there is you're going to want to budget for 30% down. You're going to want to budget for 12 months of cash reserves. And if you want to close in a corp or LLC for tax purposes, which please always consult a U.S. tax advisor about, you're going to want to go the DSCR route compared to the second home route.
Okay. Now, I know that whole verification process, right? Foreign nationals, they don't necessarily have a FICO score or a credit score. How does the bank navigate that?
Right. So they're going to substitute FICO score for assets, right? They're going to want a 30 to 40% down payment, right? Which is a higher down payment. It's less risky. They're going to want to see those reserves. Sometimes they'll even call for 24 months of reserves, so a full 2 years of reserves, because that offsets the risk of having no FICO, right? So the more assets, the more cash reserves, the more rental income of the property, right? Potentially the higher the debt service coverage ratio is, the less riskier the bank will look at the opportunity.
Okay. What about interest rates? Is it very on par with the market, let's say for an American buyer, or the interest rate's slightly higher?
The interest rates will be slightly higher, just because it's viewed as a little more risky, but 2 to 3% higher. So it's not detrimental. The numbers can still make sense. That's why we kind of run the numbers up front, so that we give them the interest rate to let them know what it would look like and make sure that it still makes sense at the end of the day.
Okay, beautiful. All right, now we have the appraisal, which we just talked about, and obviously a little bit of the loan programs for foreign nationals.
Yep.
Okay, so the next step in the process, which is pretty much simultaneous, for the entire process, would be obviously the appraisal is ordered, and also your attorney will order what's called a title report.
Yep.
Now, the title report is very, very important. And again, this is strictly talking about New York. Other states will have different types of processes for that. But in terms of the title report, what the attorney is really looking for is anything in regards to violations on the home, any back taxes owed, any liens, which is basically the owner owes some money to somebody. Okay, that's what a lien is.
All right.
Now, it's important for you to know that for the most part, this is anything that pops up on title is the seller's responsibility to remedy before you close.
Yep.
Very, very important.
Yep.
Okay, and again, this is important to have good people on your side, because there's a lot of steps, especially in New York, that are involved in this home buying process. So you need to have good people that would advise you the correct way.
Yep.
Okay, so assuming that title is clear, okay, and appraisal is good, okay, what is the next steps in terms of the bank?
Yeah, so the next step, which is really the last step, is the underwriting. Okay. So your file would go into the underwriting queue. Underwriter's going to pick it up. An underwriter at the bank kind of crosses all the T's and dots all the I's. And they make sure that the funds look good, that you have enough assets to cover the mortgage payment, that the appraisal checks off, that the title checks off. They're kind of like what I consider a goalkeeper in soccer, right? They're the goalie and the last line of defense. So once the underwriter signs off on your file, they sign off on the property, they sign off on your assets. In this case, there's no credit. Title and appraisal are clear. Then the bank is going to give you what's called the clear to close, right? In America, a clear to close basically says that we finished the financing process. The attorneys, because it's an attorney state, get alerted, and now you could proceed to scheduling.
Okay. So once we have that clear to close from the bank, we're all of the attorneys, the loan officers, the realtors, and obviously the buyers and the sellers, everybody's going to talk. Usually it's between the attorneys in an email chain to decide on a closing date, time, and location.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And prior to, and this is still very important because you are coming to the end of the process, prior to the closing, you need to have a final walkthrough. Okay. What does this final walkthrough entail? So the final walkthrough would basically be, and I want to backtrack a little bit here. The final walkthrough is recommended usually a day before or the day of the closing. All right. You want to do that final walkthrough. So you just walk the property. You're going to turn on the light switches. You're going to flush all the toilets. You're going to check under the sinks just to make sure that everything is exactly how you found it in the inspection. And anything negotiated in the inspection, you have to make sure that it's been done.
Right.
If there is a new leak, and oh my God, I've seen some stuff, man.
Oh man.
I remember a funny story. So I remember I was actually out of the country and we were closing on a property for one of my investors. And the day of, well, actually I left the day before. The closing was the day of when I was in the airplane. Okay, so the day before when we walked the property, there was a big flood in the basement. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
And I was pretty new. I was maybe like a year into the business. So obviously in front of your clients, you can't really show that you're freaked out, right? Because they're looking toward you for guidance.
For guidance, yeah.
Right? But man, I was freaking out. I was freaking out. There's a whole big puddle and I'm like, oh my goodness. But at the end of the day, this is why we do that final walkthrough.
Oh yeah.
Because that was negotiated. I ended up saving $15,000 for my client.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was a contractor, so he was able to fix that. And obviously, as the realtor, they're supposed to take video and get in contact with your buyer's attorney. Okay? And the buyer's attorney is supposed to, talk to the other attorney and remedy that. But when this was happening, so the final walkthrough was the day before, and the closing, I was literally landing, which was the day after. So I had to negotiate with the other agent while I was on the plane, texting. It was an interesting time,
and you saved them $15,000, right?
Saved them $15,000.
Because if that final walkthrough did not happen and they closed on the property, he would then assume liability of that flood, right?
Exactly. That would have been all him, right? And if again, that would have been bad luck. Right?
Oh man.
But that's because you didn't have the proper representation, right? And knowing the proper steps.
Right.
That final walkthrough, hey, maybe 95% of the time, you may not catch anything.
Right.
But that 5% is why you actually go. And that 5% is why you take a realtor with you.
Love that.
Yeah. So after the final walkthrough, then it's the day of the closing. So
absolutely, yeah.
In the day of the closing, does the bank ask for anything, or if you can enlighten us a little bit?
Yeah, so depending on if you're going to be at the closing or not, they might ask you for what's called a power of attorney, right? Power of attorney is basically you giving legal authority for somebody else to sign off on your behalf, whether that's your attorney, whether that's your realtor, family member, right? And the bank does have to approve that, right? So every lender has different requirements on what they will allow versus what they won't allow, but power of attorney is a big one.
But I mean, in terms of the bank, you guys are good then, right?
No.
Clear to close, everything is good?
Clear to close, no more documentation.
Beautiful. Yep. Okay. And now, obviously in the day of the closing, you're going to go meet at a location. You're going to see a whole bunch of paperwork. Every country is different, but here in the United States, there's a whole bunch of paperwork, especially here in New York. There's attorneys involved. If you're getting a loan, they have like a big stack of documents that you have to sign.
Yep.
All normal.
That's normal.
They're very normal. Again, that's very standard. And your attorney they literally go through every single step of that contract, of the loan documents, everything. Just so you guys are protected. Okay. And in that closing, that's where stuff can happen, right? Most of the time, 99% of the time, it's pretty smooth. But hey, if there's a discrepancy in the contracts that wasn't there when you originally signed, this is why you have that representation.
Yep.
I kind of like it. Some people don't like that New York is an attorney state for real estate. I kind of like it. It's that extra layer of protection for the buyers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For the
So
buyers, yeah.
exactly. Now, after you sign a whole bunch of those documents, it's usually an hour, maybe an hour and a half. It could be quicker, and you'll have the keys to your new home. And that's pretty much the entire process. Anything you want to add, Josh?
Um, as a foreign national investor, I would just recommend running your numbers, especially if you're looking for investments, right? Consulting the tax advisor, making sure you understand the tax ramifications as far as what you may need to file versus what you don't have to file. Right? Being on the same page with the realtor, and then just kind of choosing good locations. I mean, you want, if you're investing, right, you want good locations, maybe the Airbnb model, maybe a permanent tenant, but just having the game plan set up front is what I would recommend to anybody that's looking to purchase in the US.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's important too, to know which types of properties you can buy.
Right.
Here in New York, there's a whole bunch, but let's stick with residential,
Yep.
right? So you have condos, condominiums. So these are basically apartments, and then you have an actual deed that you own it. Okay, that's important. Now there's also something called co-ops. Co-ops, it's a little bit different than condos. They're not very common in the United States. There's only a few states, maybe a few cities in the entire country that have it. If I'm not mistaken, Chicago also has co-ops.
Yep.
And maybe Cali, but definitely Chicago.
Definitely.
So basically what you do is you actually don't own the apartment. You have what's called a proprietary lease. All right. You own shares of the building, of the business, but in itself, a co-op is actually not real estate.
Right.
You have to go through a long interview process.
Yep.
You have to go through a board approval process.
Yep.
Okay. The steps are very similar to what we just explained, except after you have signed contracts, you do have to go through that board approval process, and you have to give in possibly more documents, right, than a regular home. I mean, if you can explain a little bit about that, about co-ops.
Yeah, so it's separate from the bank process, right? That board approval process that he's referring to. So with co-ops, they're going to have a board of directors, and the board of directors kind of make decisions based off, what they feel like is beneficial for the co-op or not. So when you're buying a co-op, a lender, a bank, right? They're going to look at the financials of the building. Is the building profitable? Are they showing a loss, right? Is it a good investment for the bank? They're going to look at the occupancy. How many units are owner occupied versus rented out or unoccupied? They're going to look at the land lease. They're going to look at the budget, where they're planning to allocate funds for the upcoming year. So there's a lot more paperwork, I would say, and there's just a little bit more of a different, I wouldn't say different, I would say it's an additional step that you have to take with co-ops. So you want to make sure that if you are looking to purchase a co-op or an apartment building, you want to understand like how that management company works, right? Because at the end of the day, they have a management company put into place, and that management company is in charge of distributing the documents, right? And kind of communicating with the lender. We don't go directly to the board of directors to get those documents. We go to the management company. So you want to make sure that you understand who's in charge, who kind of spearheads that whole operation. Are they quick? Are they transparent, right? Are they professional? That's something that I would recommend to anybody that's looking to buy a co-op.
And you'll see online too that a lot of these co-ops are actually cheaper than condos.
Yep.
Okay. And granted, because there's a lot more steps, and in reality, you just own shares of the building. You don't really get a deed, right? Or title for the property, for the apartment.
Yep.
Okay. So that's a very important distinction. Co-ops are very common in Long Island and in the boroughs, and also upstate New York, Westchester County, and a little bit north of that. So Westchester County is anything north of the Bronx. Okay, just so you guys know.
Yep.
Very, very common, but it's a very important distinction. Now, apart from condos and co-ops, there's also single-family homes. There's also multifamily homes.
Yep.
Residential multifamily, kind of like what Josh explained, are up to four units.
Yep.
Okay. Now, in terms of those residential properties. Is there anything you want to add to that the buyer should, foreign nationals should keep a lookout for?
Going back to the co-op and the condo real fast, even if the building checks off, even if, you've got a ton of assets, one thing I failed to mention, that I should have, is that if there's litigation against the building, right? If somebody had an accident in the building, if there's pending litigation against that cooperative or that condo, that is a big red flag for lenders. They're going to want to know what it's for. They're going to want to see, potentially, even if it's workable, they're going to want to see paperwork from the attorney. They're going to want to see where they stand within the litigation. So something to also keep in mind and look out for is litigation against the co-op or any of the units in the co-op.
Yeah, very important. And your attorney is the one that helps you out with that. Yeah, buyer's attorney.
Yep.
So that's where he comes in he or she comes in here in New York. Let's talk about something else, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of talk with everything that's been going on in the world, and obviously even here in the United States with higher interest rates and things like that. Let's talk about why somebody would want to invest here in the United States. I can start off, right? I personally think that listen, the United States, as much as there's other countries in the world, there's nothing like the U.S., right? The security, the business backing, the
Right.
industry here. That's something that's very hard for all of that to go away.
Yep.
Right. I think, man, the United States is not going anywhere anytime soon.
No,
Right.
definitely not.
Definitely not. Especially here in New York City.
Yeah.
There's, right. There's so much going on here.
I think to your point, New York City, it's the mecca of the world. There's so many different types of cultures. There's so much diversity that people are always going to want to experience it. It's kind of like you get a little bit of different taste of pieces of the world in one city. So I think it's really cool. I think the appreciation from a, financial standpoint is amazing. If you're in the right city, if you're in the right state, which is something that also goes into that game plan that we had mentioned. But if you are in the right area with the right property, you could be seeing rapid appreciation.
Yeah.
Right. So if this is something that you maybe want to leave to your kids one day, or if this is a generational thing, how would, especially with multifamily residential in New York City, what is that appreciation like?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you touched upon that because, if we're looking at more granular, right? Let's talk about Queens. Okay. Queens, you're looking at anywhere between 3 to 5 to 6% increases every year.
Wow.
Right. Brooklyn is a little bit more, right?
Wow.
You're looking at 5 to 8.
Yep.
Funny enough, the Bronx had actually a great few years. It's been going up 9 to 10%.
Wow.
The thing is that it's a little bit more affordable up there, and people they flock to affordability within a certain radius of Manhattan.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
And obviously, not to touch too much on Jersey, but that's anything immediately around a 1-hour drive from New York City, even heading towards Jersey.
Yep.
It's getting very expensive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe tell and I know we do this every day. We're in New York State, but one thing that I have seen over the years of just being in this profession, and I think foreign national borrowers should kind of keep this in mind. The demand is always there, right? And not just saying it to say it, but the people that want to be in New York City and Manhattan that maybe can't afford to do so for whatever reason, they're going to the outskirts, right? The Bronx, Westchester, Long Island, Jersey, Connecticut. So if you are purchasing in New York specifically, you're always, worst case scenario, going to be able to sell that home, right? For a good price point for, pretty quickly, I would say as well, right?
Yeah. Especially, it depends. Obviously, it's like anything, right? It depends.
Depends,
right?
yeah.
I think for places like Queens and Nassau and Suffolk, you'll probably look to sell a little bit quicker, especially Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk. Oh man, we've seen crazy appreciation over there. You're looking at 10% year over year for the past few years. And Suffolk is going bananas right now. There's so many people looking out there because Nassau is getting expensive. Queens is expensive. And it's a natural shift from, I'm looking at the camera here. So Manhattan is here, okay? You're looking at, which is where the most expensive real estate generally is in New York City.
Right.
Then you move out to Queens, okay? And then Brooklyn and then Bronx on top of Manhattan. But people, let's just focus on Long Island. So you have Manhattan, which is more expensive. Then you have Queens, Brooklyn, which is slightly less expensive. Right now, Brooklyn is pretty expensive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then people started to make that shift out to Long Island, especially after the pandemic. There's been people wanting to get more space. So they started moving out like crazy to Nassau County, anything east of Queens. Then Nassau is getting very expensive, right? Property taxes are very high.
Yep.
Now they're going out to Suffolk, which is even more properties out there. It's bigger. And I mean, that's kind of like the trend we've been seeing,
Of course.
lately.
Yeah.
What have you been seeing in terms of buyer activity?
Yeah, I mean, that's completely spot on. I think from, like, if you're looking at it geographically, from Manhattan to Brooklyn to Queens, and the more east you go, it's getting more expensive, right? More buyers are coming out east, just for that affordability aspect. And what I'm also seeing right now is, and maybe you could touch on this, but like, sellers, they want to close quickly. That's, people want to make deals happen, especially in Long Island, right? In Queens and Brooklyn, those sorts of pockets, the houses are competitive, right? Again, depending on the type of property, depending on the price point, and things of that nature. But for the most part, you're in a competitive market. You want to be competitive when you're running your numbers, when you're putting together your offer. So yeah, the more I do this, the longer I do this, the more that I see that the demand is staying, in my opinion, and prices are not, again, in my opinion, they're not dropping in New York.
No.
They're only going up.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you have pockets like Flushing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's insane over there.
Yeah.
Brand new construction everywhere. And you see the new stadium that they're doing in Willets Point. Right? They're making a new soccer-specific stadium. And that's right next to Flushing.
Yep.
Right? And then all these areas are just going bananas. And, I think in terms of people staying in New York, I mean, New York has some of the best hospitals in the entire world.
Yep.
Some of the best schools in the entire world. Some of the best culture.
Yep.
Stuff that you really don't see in other parts of the world.
No.
There's a lot of parts of the world that try to mimic or try to be the same as New York, but you realize, right? A lot of people that leave New York City, they end up always talking about how life was in New York City.
Like clockwork. It's always that case. And like, I think especially if you're in your, I don't want to say born in New York City, but if you're immersed in that lifestyle and you understand what goes into this beautiful city, you're going to get, different types of food within a 1-block radius. You're going to have a laundromat, you're going to have a deli, you're going to have a supermarket, you're going to have 5 different types of food, all within a walking distance. You're going to see all different walks of life at any given moment. Some of the best hospitals, some of the best schools, but also really some of the best diversity that you'll ever get in the world.
Exactly. And I'll leave you with this, guys. And we've interviewed a lot of guests, right? From different parts of the world. And the United States, when you buy a property, it's actually yours. Okay? You actually get to keep it, and you actually can pass it down to your kids.
Right.
As opposed to other countries. Other countries, you don't actually own the property outright. So that's one of the big advantages of why people, no matter how bad they talk about the United States, they would want to invest here because this is where the money's at.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think like if you put your personal differences aside or opinions, I think from a business standpoint, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. So, numerically, the U.S. is a good investment. And yes, you do own your property. So, okay.
Beautiful. There you go.
Yeah.
Josh, if people wanted to find out how to contact you, how can they?
All right. So you can find me on social media. My Instagram handle is Borrow from Barrero, or you can look at Cliff Go Mortgage's website and search for my name.
All right, Josh, it was a pleasure speaking to you.